Speaking to the press on Tuesday, a European Commission official said that this framework trade agreement reached with Washington is nothing to celebrate. The EU has long maintained that tariffs are taxes that are harmful for economies and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. However, they say that it is a far improved agreement than the 30% baseline tariffs that the Trump administration was threatening if no agreement had been reached. This deal reached between US President Donald Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has received plenty of flack here in Brussels and across the EU. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban saying that von der Leyen had been eaten for breakfast by Donald Trump. Germany's finance minister also saying that the EU should have been stronger in negotiations, but the European Commission has been very strong in their stance, saying that they achieved the strongest and best possible deal they could under the circumstances.
We reached a negotiated solution to avoid a lose-lose tariff escalation. That's what our member states asked for. That's what we have delivered. We secured continued access for our companies to one of our largest and most important markets. That's what our industry asked for. That's what we have delivered.
And the Commission argues that even though this 15% baseline tariff that accounts currently for roughly 70% of European goods heading to the US isn't as low as other countries' trade agreements with Washington, such as the UK, where the baseline rate is 10%. They say there is a key difference, though. And while the 15% is, of course, higher, they say that there is no stacking in that 15%. That means that a good subject to a 15% duty here in the European Union will not be subject to further tariffs on top of that baseline. Unlike in the UK, the European Commission says that there might be a 10% tariff on a good, but it's still subject to other duties along the line, so that 10% may indeed continue to rack up and become even higher. That is how the EU rationalises it and says that their deal that reached with Washington is one that's acceptable and puts their European businesses in a competitive stance going forward. However, this framework agreement is certainly not signed, sealed and delivered yet. It is not legally binding. There has not yet been a joint statement between Washington and Brussels. There are negotiations that continue. The EU is looking for more exemptions from this baseline 15% figure on some key products such as wine and spirits going forward. So more deals need to be done, but the EU says it is confident that that can be ironed out going forward. Should it not, and should the United States change course and provide more tariffs down the line, as a hypothetical, the EU says it is prepared. Of course, these countervailing tariffs that the EU has prepped and shelved for now could, of course, conceivably be taken back off the shelf should they deem it appropriate. William Denselow, CNA, Brussels.